Carterville, welcome. We're just talking about Machiavelli and ethics. Guys, Machiavelli wrote a political classic called The Prince. The Prince. Who did he write it for? Kings and queens. That was his intended audience, kings and queens. Purpose was keep and hold power indefinitely. Keep and hold power indefinitely. Now they are caught. Yeah, don't think about this just in terms of politics. What about you apply this to your personal life? You want something desperately. You have something you want desperately. Whatever it takes to get that, whatever that is, if you have to lie, if you have to cheat, if you have to steal, it will be fully justified when you accomplish that objective. Whoa. That's what he said. That's what he said. He said this notion of morality, of ethics, that is theoretical. Losing power, being deposed, that is concrete. That is real. Whatever it takes to accomplish your objective will be more than justified by accomplishing that goal. Anything you have to do. I went back in my office to grab this, because this is some of the chapter titles of The Prince. Listen to some of these titles. On those who should become princes through crime. Is it better to be loved or feared? Should you keep your word? Why it's essential to avoid being hated or despised? How do you avoid flatterers? Then he talked about the manner in which the prince should keep his word. He said it must be understood there are two ways of fighting. One with the law, the other with knives. The first is the way of man. The second is the way of beasts. If very often the first does not work, he must therefore turn to the second. Therefore the prince must be the beast as well as the man. By the way, that's some good writing. Therefore the prince must make use of these characteristics of the beast. Of these he should choose the fox and the lion. Though the lion cannot defend himself from the snares, and the fox is helpless against the wolves, you have to be a fox to avoid the trap. And you have to be a lion to frighten away the wolves. Check out this next line. A prince never lacks sufficient reason to justify breaching faith. Men are so simple and so stupid. They are ready to follow the needs of the moment, and the deceiver will always find someone there to deceive. Here's the most chilling line. He said, when you become a prince, there'll be people that surround you that you trust. Your closest advisors that you trust. But he said, they can speak to you forthrightly in private, but never ever allow someone to criticize you in public. If you start worrying about your security, you must kill those who are closest to you. They can do you the most harm. What? Have you ever in your life come across someone like this? Ever come across someone like this? I'll tell you this. If you think you have, you haven't. Guys, this is someone who typically makes you feel good. This is someone who lights you up. And by the time you realize what their actual game is, it's too late. It's too late. In the psychological world, we have a word for these people. What do we call them? Sociopaths. Sociopaths. People that have no sense or no core that defines them.
No empathy whatsoever.
Bingo. Bingo. He spoke about morality and immorality. That's a false dichotomy. It's a false choice. There's a third alternative. The third alternative is this: amorality. Amorality. He said it's good to appear trustworthy and humane, and also to be so. However, with the mindset that if the occasion arises not to be so, one can turn and choose the opposite path with no difficulty. Because this is called situational ethics. Situational ethics. When the situation is strong enough, you can easily turn back on your higher moral principles. And this just reiterates the original point I made. He wrote the Prince for monarchs. He wrote it explicitly for monarchs, how to keep and hold power indefinitely. Speaking of the end justifying the means, Joseph Stalin, we talked about him last time. Joseph Stalin unveils his 5-year plan. My 5-year plan says this: in 5 years, we, the Soviet Union, will catch the West in advanced industrial technology. Folks, I'll tell you this. The Soviet Union was an agriculturally based economy. They were light years behind the West in advanced tech. Like what John Kennedy did in 1960. When John Kennedy said, by the end of this decade, we're going to put man on the moon. That was less ambitious than what Stalin was saying. In 5 years, we're going to basically close a gap that is about 40 years in the making. We are predominantly an agriculturally based society. What is the one thing you have to trade to get advanced tech?
The signals.
You get one thing. You're an agriculturally based economy. You've got one thing to trade. What do you trade?
Well, they trade freedom if that counts.
Wheat and
Progress.
food. Food. They trade so much food, it kicks off a massive famine. A massive famine. By the way, who's hit the hardest by that famine? Hello, Ukraine. 1 million Ukrainians die. One Western journalist from the New York Times sneaks in there. He goes into the countryside. He sees all of these dead people. There's an entire family laying there in their hut, dead. The last thing they wrote was, may no man know the suffering that we endured. Stalin was confronted with this by Western journalists. His response was, when you're making an omelet, sometimes you have to crack a few eggs. Then he said this, did we or did we not accomplish my 5-year goal? Whoa. The first thing you do if you encounter someone like this is look. Is what happens when two of these people meet each other. This is like matter and antimatter colliding before your very eyes and ears. So that is Machiavelli. Don't worry about writing this down. This is just a transition for me. So what makes these traditional forms of rule, we talked about dictatorship, we talked about monarchy, what makes them legitimate? Write this down. Max Weber. Max Weber devises his 3 sources of legitimacy. Max Weber. By the way, German sociologist.
Nice.
Weber devises his 3 sources of legitimacy. By the way, you're saying to yourself, Lee's, isn't it Weber? It says Weber. He's German, so the W's become V's. The W's become V's. So Max Weber. Max Weber. So every form of rule, whether it's democracy, it's dictatorship, it is monarchy, has to have this. It has to have this. What is legitimacy?
Real.
Proof,
Accountability.
real,
Recognition.
it can have accountability. I like that, Jack. Recognition. Recognition. The notion that this person's rule is just. It's justified. It is legitimate. Because this contains more than just like a legal baseline legal standard. This contains with it a notion of correctness, a notion of rightness in the minds of the people. That is legitimacy. That this person's rule is correct in the minds and the eyes of the people. 3 sources of it. First one's a big one. Ever seen Fiddler on the Roof?
What again?
Fiddler on the Roof.
No.
Classic play. Remember that song? Tradition. Why does my family rule this province in an unbroken line for a millennium? We have always ruled this province. Guys, monarchy draws heavily upon tradition. It draws heavily upon tradition to the point where you look at modern Great Britain, by the way, who's been modern for a long time. Everyone else has gotten rid of their monarchs. They're still hold on. I didn't mention this last time. I should have mentioned this last time. Today, the modern monarchy in Great Britain has been stripped of their political power. So there's something called chief of state. That's what King Charles is. He's chief of state. What does that mean? Basically, you're a figurehead. You're supposed to be like a unifying figure that represents the entire country. You're a unifying force. Whereas they also have a chief executive. That used to be housed within the monarchy. Now that's housed in parliament through the prime minister. That's the person who has political power. That's chief executive. Because here's the crazy thing about our system. In our system, El Presidente is supposed to be both of those things. He's supposed to be chief of state. He's also supposed to be chief executive. Which means if there's like a national tragedy, we're approaching the 25th anniversary of 9/11. 25 years. I often think of this. God forbid we have something like that happen again. God forbid something like that happens again. How do we respond as a country when that happens? By the way, talk to older people. They can tell you exactly where they were when that happened. Talk to mom and dad, talk to grandma and grandpa. Talk to old dudes like me. They can tell you exactly where they were. By the way, guess where I was?
School.
What school?
I don't know. High school? College?
Kaylin, I knew I liked you. I was in school, I was doing this. It was my first year in the classroom. It was my first year. I was like, where are we now? We're like, this is week 2. 9/11 is like in teams. I was 4 weeks on the job, fresh out of graduate school. Then this happens. I'm like, how do I possibly place these events in the context of my students? How do I do that? Finally, I said, I'm not going to do that. Here's what we're going to do. I put the live footage on the screen. We watched it. We watched it. I will never forget those videos. They're like burned in my brain. Something else I will not forget. That afternoon, walking outside, blue skies.
Yeah.
Perfect blue skies. Looking up in the sky and saying to myself, I will never see that again. As long as I live, I'll never see that again. Guess what I saw? A perfectly clear sky. Not one plane up there. No trails, nothing. All air traffic grounded for like 2 weeks. If you were traveling, you were stuck wherever you were. Guys, we had a president at the time. Did we ever have a president at the time? George W. Bush. If you think the Trumpster is polarizing, by the way, the Trumpster is polarizing. 50% of the American people did not view George W. Bush as their legitimate president. 50% said, he's not my president. They said that because in the 2000 election, that election comes down to one state. It comes down to 538 votes in one state. Bush wins the narrowest election in American history. And by the way, who happened to be governor of that state of Florida?
Jeb Bush.
It was Jeb Bush, his kid brother. Like, do you remember Trump from 2020? Stop the steal. It was Democrats saying Bush stole the election. Guys, live long enough, you'll see both parties assume their positions in opposite directions. You had the Democrats saying, he is not my president. Guys, then 9/11 happens. Bush goes to that rubble. He gets a speaker. He gets a bullhorn. And he said, all of a sudden, all the workers there that are working there, they all start clapping. He said, I hear you. The American people hears you. The people who knocked down these buildings hear from all of us. Because his approval ratings, by the way, we already think of him today. 90% approval ratings. You have Republicans and Democrats coming out of Capitol Hill, holding hands, singing God Bless America. We came together. If that happens today, does that happen again? By the way, regardless who the president is, if it's Trump or if it's AOC in a few years, does that happen? Because the president is supposed to be chief executive, but also chief of state. We represent all the people, especially in times of national tragedy. Back to Weber. How do monarchies legitimize their tradition? Tradition. Weber said this. We should not necessarily accept something. We should not necessarily accept something because it's always been. Weber said that. We should not necessarily accept something simply because it's always been. In other words, it's good to occasionally step outside of ourselves and ask ourselves this question. Why? Why? Why do we do what we do? It's good to occasionally question and ask ourselves why. Give you an example. Gentlemen in this class, do any of you guys have at your home a suit that has a suit coat? Jesse, you do?
Wait,
Does your suit coat have these annoying 3 buttons right here in the sleeve?
it's like
Yours doesn't. Are you sure?
it's like the slow addiction. I had to open down to 2 years. Well, for sure.
If you look at it, because I've owned not a ton of suits, maybe 5 suits in my lifetime. Every suit jacket I've ever had has these annoying 3 buttons. And by the way, do those buttons actually hold the sleeves together? No. Like they sit there, they like dangle there. Occasionally one of the damn things falls off. You have to find someone who actually knows how to sew to put it back on. Guys, I'm going to tell you where those buttons came from. Napoleon. Napoleon gets a brilliant idea. Napoleon says, I'm going to invade Mother Russia in the dead of winter.
Didn't work out.
Bad idea. Bad idea. The Russians are like, come on in. Come on in. By the way, they fall back. As they are falling back, they're burning food stocks. They're destroying any supplies that are left. They allow General Winter to fight the war for them. Napoleon sees his troops slowly freezing to death. They're the picture of human misery. In the middle of this, he sees something that strikes him so profoundly, he pulls aside his top general. And he says, "General, if I see this, sir, one more time, if I see this one more time, I assure you, sir, it will be your head." What does he see? It's cold. Because it's cold, people's noses are running like this. What do you do when your nose is running like crazy? Soldiers are taking their sleeves, they're doing this. The general says, "I hereby order 3 buttons be placed on every soldier's sleeves." You try to wipe your nose full of buttons. Guys, the idea is this: those buttons are still there. They're still there. Jesse, look tonight. I guarantee you those buttons are going to be there. Why? They're supposed to be there. We think the suit looks weird without the buttons. Guys, the idea is this: it's good to occasionally question why we do what we do. By the way, David made a flip argument to that. He also said this: don't also at the same time reject something because we've always done it. Don't always reject something because we've always done it. Think of this in terms of like evolution of thought. If something has survived for 5,000 years of human history, there might be a reason why we do that, whatever that is. So don't accept something because it's always been, but also don't just reject it because it's always been. So tradition is that first source of legitimacy. My favorite one. How do regimes justify their rule? Some use charisma, which, by the way, begs the question, what is charisma? You say Riz, you've been talking to my kids. They use this all the time. What is Riz?
It's short for charisma.
It is charm. It is short for, this is where the word comes from.
Red, that's red.
Gen Zers are like, we're just going to shorten this thing up and make it ours. It's charm. What else? How do you define that? How do you know?
Like not intimidating? Like,
Not it can be.
But
maybe the freedom. Okay,
you're
like you're just like, I can do it to you.
It's a front.
Interior.
If someone has like so much of this, like it's oozing out of
Yeah.
every pore of their body.
Different.
By the way, talk to men about flips. If there's a beautiful person you're interested in, like a really beautiful person, you are like frightened of that person. You're scared because there's like so much of that. Question is, what is that? I heard charm. Here's my definition: the ability to fill a room with your presence. It's the best I can come up with. The ability to fill a room with your presence. Ever seen someone like walk in the room and like they fill that room? Have you ever people watched? Ever do this? Where's your favorite place to do it?
I low-key like doing it here or at school.
You see some unusual people here.
I just,
This is a good place. Any college campus, any decent college campus, it's a fun place to do it. Where else?
So this weather community, and that's like on the corners. You're just off on right here. Can you park based on the road? Can see like people in their cars as they drive past. It's like so good that people watch our
That is interesting.
People wanting.
Like Starbucks, you see people that are like
Yeah.
the bourgeoisie. You also see like average people, you even see like some poor people. It's so good. Like poor people like cobble together the 16 or 20 bucks to get the latte. It's that good. That's a good place. I never thought of that. My favorite place, the airport. Ever done that? The airport, you see a massive humidity. You see people you did not know existed out there at the airport. Whenever you people watch, have you ever noticed there's some people, it's like you see them coming from like a mile away. Your eye is like drawn to them. You don't know what it is, but your eye is just drawn to them. There's other people you never notice. They're kind of like ghosts. Because charisma is that appeal. It's that appeal. Are we? Good place to stop. We're gonna pick up with charisma, but I see folks on the other side.
Well, you already know I'm charismatic as hell, so.
Here it is.
Right there, I'm half line next to me.
Here.
Y'all